Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails, or Rails or RO, is an open source web framework for Ruby on language. It is introduced to use rapid web development for web developers. Let's consider the history of Rails. Ruby on Rails is key in web programming world, but for the past few years or two, it makes huge difference on web programming. Ruby on Rails, not Ruby language, but Ruby on Rails using Ruby language to implement the code. Ruby on Rails was invented by David Hanson. David Hanson published first release on July 2004. In 2006, framework get well populated among IT world by approving Apple to add Ruby on Rails to their new OS called Leopard. Why Rails become so popular? Let's see what are the new things in Rails that make programmers to tend to migrate Rails. Generators, Ajax with inbuilt libraries, Rails developers can easily learn, and next is easy to start new project, and strong object-oriented and dynamic structure, and last and most important one is less code. What mean by generators is Rails use of runtime reflection and meta-programming eliminates much of the boilerplate code that you would otherwise have to create. You can often avoid what little boilerplate code remain by using the built-in generator script to create it for you. This leaves you with more time to concentrate on the code that really matters your business logic. Ruby on Rails achieve less code by following the simple Rails programming conventions. Following those conventions does more than just eliminate the need for the configuration files. It also means that Rails can automatically handle migrate lower level details without you having to tell it to do so. This means that you write fewer lines of code to implement your application. Keeping your code small means faster development and fewer bugs, which makes your code easier to understand and maintain and enhance. Who uses Rails? You can see there are a lot of famous websites uses Rails to implement their business websites. What are the true advantages of Ruby on Rails? First is conventions over configurations. Second is don't repeat yourself. Third is MVC. It's a model and view and controls structure of the framework, and reuse of code, and agile practices, and last is security. Let's see what's mean by convention over configurations. There are a lot of conventions in Ruby on Rails that you have to follow. As an example, naming conventions. Global variable must start with $sign and followed by simple cases. Class names must be camel case. File must be lowercase and separated by underscore. And again, default locations of the file, where the model files are located, where the view file are located, where the control files are located, are predefined well manner. Second famous advantage of Ruby on Rails framework is called dry. It's don't repeat yourself. Everything is defined at once for program lifetime. When needed, reuse already defined ones. By doing this, it's easier to find the code. Only need find loop only once. If you find once, that means that exists only there. By doing dry, you can achieve higher maintenance. As most of frameworks use, Ruby on Rails also use model, control, and view framework architecture. Model contains state of application. In our case, is data in a database, and again it contains relations among the data sets and data tables and data classes. View is responsible of generating user interfaces. Controller is the main part of both of three, and controller controls both model and view well mannered. Let's see how this architecture works. A browser request from controller, and controller instantiate with model. Models send requests to the database. After that, response for the requests are sent through the model to the controller. Controller manipulates the data and view through the view. View of view can be HTML, JavaScript generated page displayed through web browser. Next advantages of Ruby on Rails is reuse of code. You can find thousands of many plugins in GitHub website. As for the example, use authentication, testing, file format, etc. plugins. Again, you can import your own code from one project to another. Next advantage of Ruby on Rails is good security. Ruby on Rails get good security from true object orientation. And again, since Ruby on Rails is highly readable language, it's easy to identify mistakes have done by developers. Again, Ruby on Rails prevent SQL injection attacks. Rails prevent cross-site scripting. Rails prevents JavaScript hijacking prevention. By default, Rails enables these features. SQL coding. By SQL coding, you can disable the SQL injection attacks. By enabling HTML sanitization and CSRF protection, Ruby on Rails prevent other attack types. Rails not have superb security, but it's easier than other languages way to implement. Every language have disadvantages. Let's see what are the disadvantages of Rails. Rails is inefficient. Rails requires a lot of memory, and again memory management is really slow. Deploying Rails application is quite hard. It's harder than PHP because lot of deploying parts available. Rails, applications, gens, plugins, and application server. Most of the time deploying Rails applications done by script, so it's easy to break some